Everyone, thank you so much and welcome officially to our live session titled How Video Makes Every Educator, Student a Better Creator, specifically at Brunswick School District. This is presented by Screencastify, and we are so thankful that you're joining us today, especially because we know that you've taken time out of your day, which have been pretty busy lately. So the discussion today is going to center around our panelists sharing their thoughts around the power of video and how educators have been able to maximize learning outcomes while helping students build confidence and become the best creators they can be, as well as sharing some really practical takeaways to hopefully help you and your students improve their videos. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to introduce myself and our amazing panelists. I'm Sean Conway. I am the Partner Solutions Manager here at Screencastify, and I will be your moderator for today's session. But without further ado, the much more important people on the call, I'd love to introduce our panelists. We are going to start with Stacy. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. I am Stacy Newell, and I am the Instructional Technology Resource Teacher for Brunswick County Public Schools. This is my 15th year in education and my 3rd year serving as in this capacity. I'm excited about this opportunity, and I love Screencastify.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. Next up is Dr. Darnell Carter. Dr. Carter, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon. Pleased to be here. I currently serve as Director of Operations, so I work with non-instructional issues right now, transportation, facilities, maintenance, food service. But prior to this role, I was a principal at a middle school, and my experience has pretty much been in secondary schools. I was a high school principal, high school assistant principal, and before that, many years ago, an English teacher. And this is my 22nd year in education.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. And last but certainly not least, Miss Olivia Nelson from Screencastify. Olivia, tell us a little bit about you and your role here.
Sure. Hey, y'all. I am Olivia Nelson. I do professional development at Screencastify. I was an educator for a little over a decade before I came to Screencastify. I've worked in New York and Atlanta. Atlanta's where the y'all comes from. So I'm really excited to just sort of bookend whatever the amazing things that Stacy and Dr. Carter, Miss Newell and Dr. Carter have to share with y'all today.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. And thank you all again for taking the time out of your busy days to join us and share your experiences. And again, all of you are the reason why we do what we do here at Screencastify. Attendees, please feel free to leave your comments and questions, and we will do our best to try to answer those at the end of the session. And also, please be sure to follow our live tweet of the session on Twitter at Screencastify with the hashtag #ClassroomCreators. So with that, let's jump right in. We know that Screencastify, our mission is to provide educators and students with the tools that they need to not only become creators and improve learning outcomes, but we also empower teachers to assess those creations. I'd love for us to first talk about teachers as creators. And we're going to start with you, Stacy. Why do you think it is so important to give teachers the tools to be able to create across different mediums for students?
Thanks, Sean. Good question. So when looking at different learning styles for students, it's always important to understand how digital tools, along with other tools, can enhance student engagement. So when thinking about that, oftentimes we think of our differentiation of instruction. It's a core component of learning. It's a core component of the classroom. But however, when evaluating students' needs and their abilities to perform in all areas, it is important to have various mediums to address the individual learning styles of every student that we encounter on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Carter, I'd love to throw it to you. What are you thinking about this topic?
Ms. Newell, I just parrot a lot of what you said. It's so relevant that teachers have different tools to work with different types of students who may have different learning styles, but to take it a step further, certain content lends itself better to certain tools. So while a student may have a preference for a learning style or a learning style, they may be more tactile, they may be more visual, but there's certain skills that we all learn better by doing certain things. And, you know, it's the old example of like the bicycle, right? You can give a person a book on how to ride a bike. They read the book. It doesn't make them an expert on how to ride a bike. They actually have to learn that process on their own by trial and error. And, you know, there are certain things that you can do step by step. I think that video is kind of where it's at. Kids learn by finding things on TikTok, finding things on YouTube. Even adults We live on YouTube. Anything you don't know how to do, there's someone who does a tutorial. Some of us like step by step that actually has text on it. Stop, pause. Some people just like to watch a person do something and you're like, just stop talking. Just show me how to do it. So I think teachers need all types of tools.
Those are all really strong points. Olivia, how are you thinking about teacher tool access and then students creating across different mediums?
So I'm going to take us off-road just a tad here, Sean, so forgive me. I think that the other two folks have fully covered sort of the why, but I'll just add a little bit to the what, which is that I think it has to be really easy for teachers to use. I think teachers get really comfortable. They're expert practitioners. They are experts at what they teach and with the tools that they use. And so when we're asking teachers to explore new tools and sort of put more things in their tool belt or toolkit, so to speak, those things that we're asking teachers to adopt have to be easy to use so that we can actually encourage the use of all these different mediums so that, like Ms. Newell and Dr. Carter have said, we can actually reach students wherever they may be in whatever content we might be teaching.
Awesome.
Olivia, just to add on to what you said, I agree. I think that teachers have to have things that are user friendly, not only for the teachers, but on the reverse side, it has to be user friendly for the students. So I think that's a very, very good point. And when we're thinking about giving them the tools, too many can be too much. So I think sometimes less is best. So don't overwhelm them with the tools, but give them what they need to meet the needs of our students.
I think the less is best is such an important addition. And Stacey, I'm going to throw it back to you actually to kick us off for question 2, which is, it's really amazing to see what teachers create, of course, but it's equally valuable to put students in that driver's seat in terms of content. What positive effects have you seen on students who are given tools to create?
Well, Sean, I've seen many different things, a lot of positivity when it comes to using the different tools. However, I think back to when I was a classroom teacher. You have this great lesson plan ready to go. It has all the bells and whistles. You're going to go in there. You're going to take education by storm. You're going to make this lesson the best lesson ever. And you get in there and you realize that those students are physically in front of you. And it's like, wait a minute. This isn't going to work. So you have to switch it up. You have to change because the students aren't there academically, maybe not even socially. So that's when you have to realize and I noticed for myself that's when I realized that student voice is important. Having them to have a voice in that classroom drives your instruction as well as other things. So when children are given a platform, especially like Screencastify, it gives them the chance to creatively express themselves, be who they are without limitations. One of the most memorable experiences that I had would be with an exceptional ed class. We had a student in there, very shy, didn't want to share in front of the class, wanted to complete the assignment, but was just afraid to get in front of everybody. Well, took that student to a space where they were comfortable, created their video. They were still able to share out with the class and with everyone else. So they didn't feel excluded, but included. So, this alone is definitely leaving positive impacts on students' lives, not only, and it's teaching them while we're going along, how to be different routes to take when you're in a situation where you still have to present, you still have to do those things, but giving them a different avenue and letting them to be creative, allowing them to open up and to show who they are.
Thanks, Stacey. Dr. Carter, you ran us through quite a variety of experiences that you've had at a bunch of different levels. What positive effects have you seen on students when they're given tools to create?
I think expression, is the fundamental issue. Is children want to express themselves from the very beginning of their verbal experience. As soon as they can put together a sentence, one of the things they're most likely to say is, look what I can do. So they all want to be able to show how awesome they are, how smart they are, how well they can draw. So giving them an opportunity to mesh together their own passions about self-expression with creative content is what allows them to move forward, advance. We're all talking about deeper learning all the time, higher level thought. And that's what that's all about. It's about taking content that they've learned in a class and then taking it, escalating it into those, whether you're looking at, Webb's, DOK or Bloom's, but it's all about creativity. That is the end objective for basic structure, basic concepts they learn, and finding ways to make it as advanced as possible. And when you give them a chance to show what they can do, I mean, sometimes even something that's not tech related at all, like, those old school boxes where they made their dioramas, kids get really into those things. Like there's nothing, more exciting than seeing like a first or second grader with their little styrofoam planets that they've made their own solar system, and they've got it hanging like in a, some type of mural that's rotating. But kids like making things. Give them tools so that they can express themselves, and they will not stop. They will keep going as long as they can keep going back and saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And when we get to something like Screencastify, I think it's so amazing because it's user-friendly. It's easy for kids to make their own videos. And if you ask a kid today, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? Fame is what's most important. They all want to be internet celebrities. So, this could be a time where even if they're making something that is just part of their second grade science class or fifth grade history, they get to create content that hits the cloud. They can share it in Google. It can be uploaded to YouTube. They can do whatever they want with it. And they all get to feel like their own little personal superstars of their sphere of influence.
My first grader would certainly agree with that, in that she wants to be a YouTuber, Dr. Carter. So I can personally connect with that answer. But I think in all seriousness, the expression and creativity components of what you just outlined are so clutch to being able to us being able to expand it to more students, which I think is a really good transition to you, Olivia. You, in addition to your former experience, but currently you talk to teachers almost every day. What are you thinking about in terms of this question with students in terms of how?
Sorry. Was that for me again?
It was for Olivia, but jump in, Dr. Carter, if you got something.
I was just going to say, I think that there is a thread here, and I will say that there are those kids that want to be famous and want to be content creators. And I've heard some crazy statistic. I wish I could remember the number off the top of my head, but I just can't. But it was more than 50% of sort of teenagers and young people that said that they would want to be content creators, whatever that term tends to mean nowadays, as their professional career. And so I also know that there are those kids who maybe are not interested in creating content, and they might be, sort of to Ms. Newell's point, shy, and they might not be students that want to get in front of an audience or want anyone to see these videos that they're creating. And I think the ability of video to reach both of those groups, the group that's really confident and does want to get in front of an audience, as well as the group that is building confidence through video creation, is really, really amazing and impressive, because that group that might be shy, now all of a sudden I can make this video, I can cut out the parts where I stuttered or made a mistake, I can re-record it if I messed up entirely, I can, do all sorts of things that help me as a confidence building sort of activity and way as an entry point into sort of presentation skills for me as a person who might not naturally tend in that direction.
Those are amazing contributions, Olivia. Thank you. And we'll kind of transition with that to question 3. And Stacey, I'm going to have you kick us off 3 times in a row here. Turning to you first, you've got a significant hands-on role as instructional technology resource teacher. What are some specific examples that you can think of with teachers creating videos for students and families?
Good question. Here in Brunswick County, I have the privilege of working with administrators, students, parents, teachers, all of our faculty and staff. And I'm pleased to say that not only do our teachers use it to reach out to our students and families, but our administrators as well. One of our principals, Dr. Thornhill at the high school here, he uses Screencastify as a weekly reminder of events, happenings, things going on at his school. So he records his video, shares it to his teachers upload it to their Google Classroom, and then they send it out to their parents. So it's another way to communicate about what's going on, what the happenings are at the school, which is an awesome tool, because all of us are different. All of us receive information differently. And we know that our students may or may not share everything with us. So it kind of connects all of the dots there. Another example would be at our elementary schools. At one of our elementary schools, they do a monthly breakfast club, which is a meeting, so to speak, of all of the things that are going, same concept, getting the information out for the month. But sometimes they have special guests that come on and talk about different things that may be going on within the division. They interview different people, and they use Screencastify for that. And then they're able to share that out via social media. They also share it out with their parents. So those parents that couldn't make it there that morning. And then that opens those questions up for parents, and they have a link that goes along with that video where they can go in, parents can send questions to the principal, to the administrators, and they can kind of talk about it in the next month. Hey, we got these questions and we want to address this. So it does open up things and ideas for that. The third thing that comes to mind is from the technology standpoint. We use Screencastify a lot when it comes to getting out those informational videos. How-to videos are really huge. And where we are located, it's a low income. A lot of our students are home with grandparents who just does not understand the concepts, especially during the pandemic when Chromebooks were essential. That was their only means of getting the instruction. They didn't know how to do simple things like powering the devices on and off, charging the devices. So it allowed us to be able to create those videos, to share out to our families, to share out to our students, even quick troubleshooting videos on how to reset your device. So it has really helped. And I think that not only is it beneficial for our teachers, but at all levels within the division.
Thank you. And Olivia, thinking about the different examples that Stacey just kind of walked through, when you talk to teachers, what are some tips that you give teachers for creating some of those video examples?
Okay, so I'll spare you all everything I've got, but I am going to hop on my soapbox for just a moment, so bear with me. The specific soapbox that I'm going to hop on, because I happen to have a lot, is about QR codes and sharing videos via QR codes. So I think I could talk here for hours on end about the different ways that you can create videos and the different kinds of videos that you can create. But what I think I'll highlight here is a specific way of then sharing those videos, which is via QR code. So if you have never used it, I totally recommend using it. You can share any video that you create with Screencastify via QR code. If you've ever met me before, I'm certain that you've heard me talk about this, so forgive me. But basically, I think this is a great way to share for a lot of different reasons. So I've seen some teachers really embrace video in the in-person classroom with the QR codes, in terms of putting QR codes around the classroom and having a gallery walk where students can scan with tablets or Chromebooks or whatever and view different videos. I've seen teachers create directions for different centers or stations or differentiated activities that they're doing in the classroom, and again, physically place those QR codes throughout the classroom. I've seen teachers add QR codes to their printed physical newsletters that they're sending home to make that sort of a dynamic element of a newsletter. And then I've also seen that same sort of like printed use with awards. So teachers are adding sort of a QR code in the corner of a certificate, and now all of a sudden a student can scan that QR code and see a video of their teacher congratulating them for winning this award, right? So tons and tons of different sort of use cases that I've seen with the QR codes. But if you haven't tried it, I really, really think it's just such a creative way to be able to share video with families and with students in a variety of contexts.
Thanks, Olivia. I'm just sad that we can't give you more time on the soapbox. I guess we'll have to schedule a follow-up for you to really get into all that for us. And Stacey, we're coming right back to you. And in terms of both your original response and then what Olivia added on there, we saw an example of teachers in your school, I think, creating snippets of the day for students who were out. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you have seen it be valuable for students?
Absolutely, Sean. So yes, the snippets of the day that some of our teachers are using is very valuable, not for only for our students that are absent, but for our struggling students. And the snippets of the day kind of, as you know, due to the pandemic, students fell behind academically. So in an effort to close that achievement gap and to help our students to succeed, our teachers are creating snippets of the day. So they kind of cover the objective of the day, whatever the lesson was. For instance, if it's a math class, they have examples there and information that will just help that student grasp the concept and not get farther behind, because the idea is that we want to close the achievement gap even in their absence. Not only in their absence, again, I want to reiterate, we don't only use those for students that are absent, but our students, anyone that's enrolled in that class, will have access to those videos to go back, to look at them, to try to get a better understanding of the materials that's been covered. So I think that they have been beneficial since going to from virtual to hybrid and now in person. But I also think that it was a great tool. It's a great tool, and our students use them, and our teachers have kind of taken it under and enjoy doing it. And we have seen growth in our students because all of them have access to the videos, and they're able to go back and look at those videos and then bring those questions the next day, or just, I mean, I'm a person, sometimes I don't get it the first time when the teacher is presenting. I didn't like to ask questions in school. That was not my thing. I'm the kid in the back that'll wait until, everybody's going out to class and say, hey. But if I had those videos, I probably could go back home, listen to it again, pause it, rewind it, play around with it until I could get a better understanding. So they have been very, very valuable here in Brunswick.
Thanks, Stacey. As you were talking, all I could think about was how I remember when I used to assign notes or even guided notes in class. Like when they left, who knows what they were walking out of that classroom with in terms of the variety the students would take away from it. But to your point about snippets of the day, you have those documented examples that are now universal, and you can go back and get them as many times as possible. Which, Olivia, coming to you next, in terms of teachers capturing their day, I think your QR codes were good examples, but what other tips do you think for capturing their day, Olivia?
So I think when we think about snippets of the day, one thing that I think is amazing, and of course I'll plug QR codes again here, but is that you can view these videos on any device. And so I think, to Ms. Newell's point, we have students that are logging in and accessing content from a number of different sort of ways and places and contexts and times, sort of all of that universal design for learning, like pace and place thing. But I think that in this case, one of the things that makes this really beneficial is all of the different ways that students can access those videos when we think about sharing, right? So you can share it via email, you can share it via QR code, you can share it on a classroom, you can copy a link and paste it somewhere, you can print something out. So I really think that the sort of differentiated access is also a thing in terms of when we think about really making sure that those students that are missing those days for whatever reason can access that wherever they might have been instead. And so it really, in terms of building community, makes me as a student feel a level of inclusion that I might not feel if I'm having to get on a computer to access this video. I don't have a computer at home, so I can use mom's phone or whatever to view the video. And so I think that we're really including the folks that may be missing out.
You're all making this job way too easy in terms of the transitions here, Olivia. Thank you. Speaking of differentiation, Stacey, we're going to come to you one more time, and I promise we're going to give you a break, and we're going to throw it to Dr. Carter here after this. Students obviously have different needs in the classroom. How has video helped your teachers in terms of differentiated instruction?
Well, as we all know, and it has been stated before, all students are different and they learn differently. With that being said, video has helped in the terms of differentiated instruction in so many capacities. When you think about those students that are auditory learners, it allows them the opportunity to hear the lesson as many times as needed. For that absent student, it allows them the opportunity to keep up with the lesson or what has happened or the instruction that has taken place on the day that they were absent. For that shy student that just doesn't want to talk in front of everybody, it allows them to have a voice. When you think about it, it allows for more student engagement. It increases achievement. When you have that student engagement, your scores, the student's ability to learn is going to increase. That achievement gap is going to close when those students are engaged in learning. It allows for flexibility, especially for our exceptional students or any students really. It allows them to play back, rewind, pause until they have a better understanding of what is being presented and what information the teacher is trying to deliver.
Thank you. And Olivia, when you think about teachers that come to you and say, what are some ways that we've talked about differentiation? How do you generally lead some of your sessions when differentiation is one of those specific topics?
Definitely. So, Dr. Carter, if I forget anything, please feel free to jump in. But what I will say here is that it's actually from the other side. I'll talk about a little bit. So, Ms. Newell talked a lot about how video can serve as a differentiation tool for the teachers in terms of what it gives to students. But I also think when we're thinking about how to make those decisions around differentiation and who to provide what kinds of content, some of the data that you can get from video with Screencastify, so those interactive questions and those viewer analytics that you can gather when you share your videos out, can help make some of those decisions around differentiation. So I think we're in a unique position here where it's not just about the content and the ways that you're providing students access to this content, but it's also about how the teachers are able to actually strategically make those decisions instead of being like willy-nilly or whatever it is about who's getting what content and what's working for who and who needs what. And when I'm making those stations in my classroom, and I'm using those directions, who am I sending where, right? Those are the kinds of things that I can sort of make based on some of that data and that evidence that I can get from Screencastify.
Great, thanks, Olivia. And Dr. Carter, I want to turn to you next. You mentioned something at the top in terms of creation from the student side. Can you talk a little bit about how you see students create in the variety of your experiences and then how it benefited their learning?
Yes, thank you. Going back to something that Olivia said earlier about students who may not be confident in their own ability, when students have to present something, I think that, just like practicing for a stage play, we rehearse, but then on show night, it looks like, we're all naturals, but it gives an opportunity for students to rehearse on their own, edit themselves, critique themselves. And I think even when video is just a prep tool to get ready for live performance, the confidence that comes from getting more comfortable and critiquing their own performance before the live show really helps students who may not be enthusiastic about public speaking. I also think that it gives a chance for students to create their own little study libraries. Like sometimes we have students who technology in this format, for those of y'all, if you've never used Screencastify, you may not be aware of it, but the video snippets can be really short. So it's almost like making flashcards. A kid could, if they wanted to, if they're prepping or studying for a test, they could make their own short answers and use it as a study aid. They can create their own presentations. And one of the things I really like about it is when we give students group assignments, they don't actually have to be on the same device to edit and splice a video together. They all have cloud storage and Google accounts, so they can share materials amongst themselves, record their own pieces, and then stitch them all together to make one seamless video. And I think that the collaboration piece is really big and allows a student, even sometimes a student who's not even in the same room with them, to still be able to collaborate through the technology.
Those are so many great points. I mean, I never personally considered the videos as flashcards, though. I think that's real brilliant. Olivia, would love to throw it to you when teachers come to you and say, hey, I'd love to get my students started using Screencastify, or even a student themselves maybe gets in touch with you and says, I want to start. What are some things that you generally talk to those folks about?
Totally. So I think I have about 3 different buckets here that I would place video that students are creating in. The first one is really mostly fun or exploratory or sort of extension activities. I have seen, sort of back to our point a while ago about students wanting to be content creators, I've seen students make podcasts. I've seen them put on comedy shows and poetry slams and all kinds of sort of fun activities that may or may not relate directly to the standards-based content that they're learning in their classrooms. So I think that's one bucket that certainly works for students as creators. I think the second thing I would say is sort of as a teaching tool. I think Dr. Carter, you spoke to this a little bit, but in addition to sort of making those flashcards for themselves, I'm sure that all of the educators in this room, including all of our panel, can speak to those students where you as the educator say something until you're blue in the face, and all of a sudden, so-and-so's friend Jimmy says the same thing that you feel as if you've been saying for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden the student who didn't understand it when you said it is like, oh yeah, that's very, very clear, right? And you're like, I think I've been saying that, but okay, as long as you get it. And so I think we can also consider those sort of flashcards or teaching moments where you might be teaching yourself or a peer to be really powerful in terms of student creation. And the last thing I would say is taking it back to the previous question and gathering evidence. So you have those interactive questions, you have those viewer analytics. And then also, I think as teachers, we fully 10,000% in any subject, in any discipline, recognize the power of a performance task as opposed to a written assessment, right? The difficulty with a performance task is that it takes up instructional time. In order to have students do fluency drills or give presentations, I have to reserve 2 hours of time to give them the fluency drill or have them do the presentations. And so I think that, no one would deny the power of performance tasks, but sometimes we sort of sacrifice the sort of strength pedagogically of the assessment for simply time we have. And so I think video frees us up to say, we believe strongly in this, in the sort of value of this, and now we can do it without eating into our instructional time. Students can record their presentations at home. They can read a passage to demonstrate fluency over video. And so you still have that value without using your instructional time.
Thanks, Olivia. And Dr. Carter, we're going to throw the last question over to you to kick us off, and then feel free, Olivia and Stacey, after, to please chime in. I've also heard you talk a little bit about students rewatching their videos to improve their understanding of different subjects. How has that ability helped with giving students the option and ability to learn at their own pace?
I think that is really helpful, because sometimes in a class, a student can be self-conscious about raising their hand and asking a question, or asking the teacher to repeat something they've already said. So no one ever wants to appear to be the one person that doesn't know what's going on. And not just because of Screencastify, but because of the immense amount of data and information that's available on the web, students can answer their own questions quickly. But if a teacher can reasonably predict what type of questions their students are going to have, then they can drill those answers to those frequently asked questions into a video that they would prepare for students, and give them a step-by-step guide, which would allow a student to go back and look at it and work on their own. And I heard someone say recently, never waste a crisis. So like, even in the worst situations, we have to find ways to come out of it better than we went into it. And when we were thrown into virtual class, intermittent meeting based on the COVID numbers and things like that, we had a teacher shortage, and I ended up teaching a class at a middle school. So I was teaching a 7th grade math class, and I started heavily using Screencastify and making videos on how to solve certain questions. So I would make an example of each different type question with the solution set and showing how we work through the solution. And so when students ask questions, I'm able to say, go back to example A, go to example B. And I think some of them really, through repetition, made a lot of progress and felt good about not having to ask specifically to get that help.
Thank you. And so many really critical points there. Olivia, thinking about the context of what Dr. Carter said, whether it's self-paced learning, personalized, how do you generally offer guidance when people want to implement some things of students being able to execute at their own pace?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things to say here. I think one, we have to acknowledge the sort of ability of any one-off video that we create. So we talked about student snippets. We're talking about any individual sort of lesson, any one video that we might create as being really powerful in giving students sort of what you guys have already spoken to, like the power to rewind and pause. I think the other thing I would say is I have built entire courses using videos with Screencastify, right? So I've built sort of entire progressions of learning that students can go through, whether it's, second graders all the way up to adult learners, thinking about being able to move through material at their own pace, answer questions, engage in certain other sort of activities, creating their own videos, right, at given points. And so I think there are a lot of ways that we can be creative in actually stringing together, besides the use of one video, but stringing together multiple videos to build out entire modules, entire units, entire courses that are based around video. And so I think that that is really exciting when we think about students being able to pace their own learning in sort of a larger context. And then the last thing I would say is, I think Dr. Carter spoke to this, is the ability to self-evaluate that comes a little bit with video and with knowing that you can stop and rewind. I think sometimes, and I have certainly been this student myself, I think sometimes I have sat in class and struggled to understand something, and the lesson keeps going, and all I know is that I'm lost, and I'm not quite clear on when or where I got lost because it's just moving. But I think when I have access to video and the ability to, and I know that I have that as a tool, then all of a sudden as a learner, I can say, oh, wait, here is exactly where I stopped understanding. I'm going to rewind and just re-listen to this piece because I know that I can do that. Whereas I think I'm no psychologist, but I would assume that what's happening when I'm in an in-person environment is that I'm using all my cognitive capital to try to keep up and to figure out if I can keep up, as opposed to being able to be comfortable in the fact that I don't need to keep up because I can rewind and figure it out.
And one thing I'd add to that, Olivia, is we've talked about all of the content that's available on the web, and sometimes it's educational content. A teacher can look at it and be like, you know what, that's really good, but it's not quite what my students need to do. And this is the type of technology that allows teachers to tailor what they want their students to do to the video that they create. You're creating it to match. This is on demand, and that's how kids learn. They the kids that we have now in our schools, they are used to accessing everything on demand, not waiting. So I think it's great that you can create the content specifically for the task that you want your students to do, not trying to match your assignment to some video that you found made by a teacher 5 years ago.
And to add to that, I think that we've spoken a lot on, in a sense, closing the achievement gap and having those videos readily available for those students that are struggling or that are behind. But it also offers the opportunity for us to give challenges to those students that are above grade level, because not all students are behind, not all students are on. So taking them to the next level, it may not be something that, it may not be a standard or a strand that you have to teach, but it's taking them to the next level to prepare them for the next school year. So it opens up opportunities for learning in so many different ways.
I can't think of a better way to end that session than with that last comment there. So we will call it there. Before we do, though, if anybody has any questions that are remaining, please feel free to either drop them in the chat now or tweet those questions at us, and we will happily get back to you tomorrow or later on this week. And with that said, we want to extend a very profound thank you first to all the panelists for taking the time and sharing your extreme expertise in the topic of video and Screencastify, but also to all of the attendees. What you do each and every day is so important and noticed by us and by those around you that we just want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for being interested in attending today, and we hope that you have a great rest of your Wednesday and week. Let us know what you think. Bye, everyone.